We're doing 3 major jobs on the hard stand: the rigging, the deck, and the bottom. It's time to sort out our teak deck. So Nandji 2 has a teak deck. Teak deck, leaky teaky, it's wrecked. We need to do something about it. And over the last month, you know, we've gone through and pulled out 1,034 screws out of the deck. So then drilled out and capped in all of those holes into the core with epoxy, filled up the holes with epoxy and put the new caps on top. So I did that 1,034 times as well. And now we're up to that final stage of removing all the caulking, re-caulking the whole deck and giving it that sand and making it look magnificent. Before we can put in this new SIS 440 caulking by Teak Deck systems, we need to get out the old stuff. And to get out the old stuff, there's no real easy way of going about it, mate. You just need to man up and get stuck into it. So I got this little hook from Teak Deck systems. So you just sort of cut down either side with a Stanley knife, and then you get your hook into it and scrape on through. I sort of just went ham today because I didn't want to sit around. I just want to start testing things out and to see how it would go. But without any sort of shade, it is caulking in Thailand. It's like 40 degrees every day, and the forecast is suggesting that there's going to be thunder and lightning storms for the foreseeable future. Whilst it's clear skies today, tomorrow there's 40% chance of rain. Fingers crossed there is nothing, because I sort of looked at the weather after I did what I did today, and that's remove a heap of caulking. So the first job for tomorrow, Nandji 2 needs to get under another tent.
Satisfying part of the job. So I've cut down both sides of the caulking, and now I'm about to peel it out, and hopefully it's all out in one nice big piece. How thick that is. Had a little bit of a thin bit there, but look at that. Just trying to get as much out as you can in the first run, so then you don't have to scrape so much of it out, because that's the hard bit. We finished pulling out all of the caulking, and there's still some residue that's left in on both sides. We need to remove all of that so that the new caulking can adhere to the wood. Along with the hook, Teak Decking also have another tool, which is this little sander here. So you can set your depth of it here using the little Allen key, and then you got your sandpaper on the side here, and then you can kind of push it along and sand it all back.
With Benita busy sanding the seams, I can start actually sanding the deck. So I want to give it just a bit of a light sand all over with a 40 grit, because it's so rough and grey before we caulk. So just got to take it down to a little bit closer to the final sort of finish. So then once the caulking goes in, I can just sand it with 120, and that's the final product. There's a few raised areas like here at the back on the lazarette hatch and the side hatches where the hinges were, so they're sort of raised. So previously, or it's just been over time and the teak's worn down. So there's a few areas that I want to equal up to make it smooth with the deck, and the hinges is one of them. Along the edge of the sail track, there used to be sort of little 45-degree cuts, I guess, so you wouldn't stub your toe on the sail track, but we've since removed them and they're not going back on, and because of that there's a raised edge along the side of the sail track as well, so I want to sand that down. Firstly I was going to remove the sail track altogether and then sand it all flush and flat, but then I started thinking about it, and because the sail track is raised, I want to keep the sail track raised anyway, so water then doesn't pull up on the side and potentially go down those screw holes, so at least it's going to drain off at a lower angle. That's my thinking anyway. So I'm going to leave the sail track on, and then all of the bolts of the sail track I'll inspect underneath, and where they have been leaking or dripping I'll just reseal them. Currently there's only a couple of bolts that do leak on the sail track. We can tell because of the inside veneers of the cupboard, they're not rotten out, so the sail track's fine. I've already done starboard side, you probably tell because I'm covered in dust, and there's a big mess I've made around the boat because it is a very dusty job. It gives you a good indication of what the finished product of the deck is going to look like, and mate, it is going to look amazing, and I'm very glad that we've gone to this effort to fix it up. It's going to be well worth it in the end, so I'm happy. We're just going to keep going. Now that we got the deck 95% complete, all the seams are sanded, it's up to the point where we've just got to sand the entire deck before I caulk it. It's time to tackle the capping rails instead, and you can see the capping rails, they're another beautiful piece, solid piece of teak. The way they're attached is that they're through bolted into the hull, and so all of those bolts really should be reset and resealed, except to get to all those bolts is extremely difficult. Some of them are leaking, and where it does leak though, it doesn't drip onto anything like where it could cause damage. It just literally goes onto the inside of the hull and trickles down into the bilge. So I figure rather than doing a proper job on this, which would involve having to remove all the stanchions and the handrails because they're screwed into the top of the capping rails, and then removing the capping rails themselves, machining them and rebedding them all, which means I'd have to take out all of those bolts, or even just like setting those bolts deeper. Mate, it adds a huge job, so I figure I'm just going to shortcut this one and shove some epoxy around those holes, and hopefully that clogs up any sort of air hole or water hole, should I say, to get into the inside of the boat so there'll be no more water ingress. And we're going to sand back all those capping rails and then seal it. Not sure whether I'll paint them with epoxy before I put polyurethane clear varnish coat on it, polyurethane clear coat on it. Uncle said maybe paint them with epoxy. He's done that previously, which will add to the yellowing as the epoxy sort of goes off. But I'm not sure whether I'll do that or not, but I have epoxied up all of those holes so far, but now let's just sand it all and see what it looks like, whether then I can just coat it up and make it look pretty or not. Now, I don't condone my actions, but sometimes it's better to apologise than to ask for permission. I tried my hardest to get some scaffolding. I couldn't get it. I found these stairs just on the other side of our neighbour's tent here. They'll do perfect.
Most of the capping rails have been done, but there are some patches like around the edges that still need to be sanded. Our rigging was meant to rock up yesterday and it didn't. And it's actually a public holiday today, but a truck has just pulled out the front, so could be. This could be our rig. Up to the final stages of caulking, and what we need is a clean base. So we need to make sure that there's no dust or dirt, and really give it a good clean so that the caulking can stick to the wood and not to any dust that's in those seams. So I'm literally scrubbing the deck with this this thing. The wood is just looking incredible. I don't know if it's coming up on camera, but it's looking so good. And you know, there were a lot of people that were concerned about Yosh pulling out the screws, because he pulled the screws out and then he just bunged them up again. And we'd read on Thailand forums that the wood is heavily glued down, so it's not going to go anywhere, and they have been 100% correct. This wood, without the caulking in between, it is solid, it's not going anywhere. Yeah, it did seem like a strange thing to do in the beginning, but thanks to the Thailand group for the advice, yeah, they were right.
So we've been carrying around these boxes under the table for quite a few weeks now, since our last trip to Langkawi, and tomorrow we'll be getting rid of them because we're caulking. So the caulking we're going to use is this SIS 440 by Teak Decking Systems. Now, I chose this caulking for a number of reasons. One, because you don't need to use a primer, providing we have nice clean seams, it'll adhere. Two, it's a one-part polymer, so you can just squirt it straight in and it'll naturally cure with the moisture in the air. Three, it won't clog up the sandpaper when it comes to cleaning up. And now, I know me, I'm not going to use tape, so I'm just going to be squirting it, and I want to be able to sand the deck clean. So not clogging up the sandpaper is very important. It's a good feeling to be up to this point now. We're on the countdown till we go in the water. Squirt all this in tomorrow, let it cure, and then sand it in the water. Let's go. So we've left the tent on, so we're not in direct raw sunlight, because it is pretty hot here in Thailand. It's best to apply the caulking when the deck isn't super hot, because if it is super hot, it could bubble. Now don't do it when it's wet. I've got my little squeegee, nice clean rag, and acetone. Now Mum's gone over the whole lot, the whole seams, and gave it a good mum clean. And now the final thing to clean up those seams and where the caulking is going to bond to, just have to clean all the seams now with acetone. And this will remove any of that last little bit of debris. It's all in the preparation, eh? Like, that's what takes so much time. Technique I'm sort of adopting is like cutting off the tip of the tube here, so for one, it's a bigger area, a bigger hole for the caulking to squeeze out of, because when it's that real little small hole to start with, it's just a whole lot of work and a whole lot of extra strain that you need to go through. But so nipping off that tip and then squishing it with multi-plus or with pliers or whatever, so then the tip can get right down into your groove, still into your seam, because it's key to get all that caulking to fill up that whole void. You don't want it just to be sitting on the top and have air underneath. So by getting the tip deep down into the seam and then squishing through, making it overflow out of the top, and then going back over it with a little squeegee, to make sure it's really forced down. And the end result, you sort of want this little proud bead sort of sticking out the top of your seam. Technique I'm going to adopt here is the no tape technique. Rather than taping up every single seam, I feel like that's just hours of taping and you're still going to make a mess. Because I first sanded the whole deck with 60 grit, I want to do a final sand with 120 grit. So that's what I'll use when I'm taking off of the caulking, and then I'm going to get a final finish, so a much smoother texture using the 120. Finally, it is the final stage of this process of rejuvenating the teak deck. It's been a journey, not gonna lie. We've still got quite a few hours on the sander to get back to the finished product of the deck. All the seams have been caulked, you know, it's all been drying for over 24 hours now. Let's just make it look beautiful, hey? So are you ready for the most satisfying time lapse you'll ever witness? To say that wasn't a stressful event would be an understatement. Oh my gosh, I literally finished sanding the deck like an hour and a half ago. And by the time I had packed up, dusted off, paid our bill, they've already got it in the slings and cradle ready to go in. So I was pretty much sanded until 11:30 last night and started at 6 AM this morning and sanded until 1:30. So, mate, what a bloody stressful scenario. But down she goes. Slow and steady.
Well, the teak deck is finally done. Our teak deck was over 20 years old and it really needed some work. It's something that we've been contemplating since before we even bought Nandji 2. And I guess we had three options that we could have tackled this project. The first one is to completely rip up all the teak and replace it. This is a very expensive exercise. We got a quote for it and it was over $40,000. So that was a hard no from the very beginning. Another option could have been to rip up all of the teak and then fiberglass it in and put like a non-skid over the top of it. This is a project that would have had to be done completely undercover in the boatyard. It would have been more expensive for us, and also working with fiberglass, the thought of billing, fairing and sanding for days on end in full PPE, so a full suit and the mask and everything, just didn't really sound appealing to us. We wouldn't have been able to live on the boat whilst doing it that way as well, and it would have worked out to be more expensive. So choosing to refurbish the deck, it's worked out cheaper, in some ways easier, and we've been able to do it bit by bit as we continued sailing. Josh was able to do all the rebunging while we were cruising around Thailand, so that was, I don't know, for us it was a better option.
It's time to unveil. You know, yesterday we went in the water. It was definitely a lot more work than I anticipated, but let's check it out, eh? Let's unveil, because oh my god, it is way better than I expected. It was well worth the effort. I'm so bloody stoked with how this has turned out. Can't believe they wanted 40 grand for this. Check it out. Maybe I'll go into the teak deck building business, mate. This is insane. In saying that, I never want to do that again because it was a lot of work. But have a look at it. Like, I'm so happy with how all the bungs are. They've sanded down really well, and just the colour of the wood that really sort of pops. It's just natural at the moment. Not sure whether we'll just put salt water on it and just keep planting it with salt water. Sort of like the colour though. I don't really want it to change colour into the grey, so maybe we might put a sealer on it. I'm not sure, but just for now, we're just going on to admire it. And any of you teak experts out there, definitely send through some ideas and your maintenance schedule for keeping the teak looking pretty, because we do want to keep it pretty, and we'd like to reduce the amount of usage of chemicals and stuff on it. We'd like to keep it natural, but we also don't want it to grey. So tell us your plans, tell us what to do. But for now, I'm just going to bask in it. This is going to look so sick when we run the sale. Instagram stories overload.